Welcome to Adventures in Accessibility, a podcast that explores the far reaches of disability, access, and inclusion, with your host, Emily Schumann.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today's guest is Jessica Cox. Jessica is recognized internationally as an inspirational keynote speaker. Born without arms, Jessica now flies airplanes, drives cars, and otherwise lives a normal life using her feet as others use their hands. She holds the title of the first person without arms to earn a black belt in ATA martial arts and the Guinness World Record for being the first armless person in aviation history to earn a pilot's certificate. Convinced that the way we think has a greater impact on our lives than our physical constraints, Jessica chose to pursue a degree in psychology at the University of Arizona. Since then, she has traveled to 26 countries on 6 continents, sharing her inspirational message. Hi, Jessica. Thanks so much for being our guest today. We are so pleased to have you with us.
Glad to be on.
So some of our listeners might not be familiar with you and your story, so we'd love to hear more about you kind of in your own words.
Okay, well, what I live basically is my definition of normal, but I guess it is something that needs to be described for listeners since there won't be visual means. I was born without both of my arms, and I've lived my entire life through my feet. My feet have served as my hands, my legs have served as my arms, and I went through the normal challenges of childhood, learning to feed myself with my feet, learning to write in school at a public elementary school, doing the normal childhood things. I had wonderful parents who gave me a wonderful upbringing that allowed me to have this foundation of you can do anything. I mean, they enrolled me in everything from dance lessons to swim lessons to everything, and not seeing my disability, my not having arms, as something that should hold me back.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really have taken that message to heart because you have the distinction of being the first armless pilot. Is that right? Can you tell us about that journey?
Sure. So fast forward through my childhood, after my university experience, getting a degree, I went right into flight training to become the world's first armless pilot. And we started that endeavor. When I say we, meaning I've received a lot of support from the aviation community to pursue it. And when I started, it was really a challenge trying to figure out how to do something no one had done before. And it was really, though, about breaking it down into these doable steps. But my whole life prior to flight training was all about that, living life with your feet, through your feet, without arms. You learn to do that naturally out of necessity. You learn to adapt and have more creativity because you are learning to do things in a different way than everyone else. So that skill set kind of came into play when I went to pursue flight training. And in doing so, and the help of course, the aviation community, I was able to pursue my sport pilot certificate and later earned the Guinness World Record for being the first woman without arms to fly. And as far as I know, there's no other man out there. But I think the Guinness World Record title required specifications. So I was honored to receive that title and now have used it to launch the vehicle of impact, which I call it, because it's allowed me to share the message that if I can become a pilot without arms, there really isn't anything that others should be held back from, and especially in countries where disability rights are not the same as here in the United States.
There's another first that I'm really curious about learning more about. You're also the first armless black belt. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, I earned a black belt as a 14-year-old and then later joined another version of Taekwondo called the American Taekwondo Association and earned a black belt, becoming the first person in the American Taekwondo Association to earn a black belt without arms.
That's incredible. And I also read about you that you actually stopped using prosthetic arms around when you were 14. So can you talk more about what led to that decision?
Prosthetics have been a very wonderful resource for many people who've lost limbs due to trauma, disease. Many veterans out there have been able to resume their life when they lose a limb. But, for me, I was born this way. As I said earlier, it was very natural to use my feet. But I was given the option of prosthetics. I wore them for 11 years in the 90s. And wearing them, I never made this connection to them as being beneficial. I'll say I use them to fill the empty sleeves, but I could carry a few items. For me, I was just faster and more efficient, and it was easier for me to use my toes and my feet, despite the option of having those prosthetic arms and having the therapy to learn how to use them over the course of 11 years.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, you were born with your disability. You've had it all your life. So I'm curious to know, when and how did you learn about the Americans with Disabilities Act?
So it's interesting because I can recall in first grade when there was a shift, a lot of effort, a lot of focus on my needs in school and how to be successful. In first grade is when the ADA came into effect. And that's when a special desk was made for me. Some handles were switched out on the doors so that I could push a lever door handle instead of a round knob. And I was able to have a special space in a restroom so I could use it independently. And all these things were happening. And at the time, I didn't know they were a result of the ADA and the funding that came from that. But now, as an adult, I realized that it was because of that. And as an adult, I learned about the ADA, learned about the impact. I was invited for the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act that happened in the White House. And that was a real honor because I was there meeting President Obama, meeting a lot of disability advocates, and my whole world of advocacy opened up. And I became aware of some of the things that happened as a result of the ADA and how they affected me, whether I made that connection early on or not. They did. And now I was happy to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act by doing something I felt was something we wanted to do just because we knew the impact that former Senator Tom Harkin, former senator of Iowa, his role in the ADA as being the senator who proposed it on the floor, the Senate floor, and his involvement with disability rights his whole career. We wanted to give him a wonderful flight, and so I took him up flying in the Ercoupe airplane that I fly, as he's a former pilot, Navy pilot, so he really had a great thrill, and we did that in celebration of the 30th anniversary of Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. What a cool experience for both of you. Yeah, Senator Harkin is often referred to as the architect of the ADA, so he certainly is a pivotal person in our world. Would you say that that was kind of your favorite aviation memory, or is there something that even surpasses that?
I gotta say, he was pretty delighted, and he turned to me and said this was his favorite celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, he's probably biased because as pilots, we share that common ground, and
Sure.
pilots have our own little world of flying, and we enjoy it so much. That was a definite highlight. I think about some of the lives of children with disabilities. I just love children, and to see the impact of meeting someone and having an experience that I can provide for them is really what is so special too, is using aviation as a vehicle in that. I just had a fly day the other day, not a fly day, but we'll call it an airport day, where I brought children who were born with different hand and arm differences, limb differences. I invited a couple of them with their parents and family to the airport to see the Ercoupe airplane and to sit in the plane and just to see their eyes widen and know that she can fly this thing. I think that was a very special moment, and we'll continue to repeat those moments to make that have that impact on children with disabilities.
And what's next for you in aviation? What are you going to do moving forward?
Similar to that airport day, I have a nonprofit called Right Footed Foundation International, and it's a 501c3. And I know that the aviation is going to be a huge portion of our focus. I've had this nonprofit for 5 years, and aviation is being used as a means of inspiration to show that disability doesn't mean inability. I think we're going to continue to do some of that work. We'll continue to use the airplane as a symbol of what's possible for anyone, with a focus on people with disabilities and allowing the opportunities, especially internationally, I think, in countries where people with disabilities aren't given the opportunity to even go to school.
Well, I love that message, that philosophy of yours. Disability does not mean inability. I think that's so powerful. And so how do you plan to continue your advocacy work for amputees?
I really have a passion for helping amputees or people similar to my challenges, in the sense I've received a lot of phone calls from parents who are clueless. For example, the other day, a mother called me and said, I don't know how to help my son, who was also born without arms.
Mm.
He needs to learn how to dress himself. And I thankfully had this wonderful resource of an occupational therapist who helped me come up with this idea of a dressing hook. And so I think gearing and helping children with disabilities without limbs, helping adults who may have lost their limbs, helping them in the department of becoming independent when it comes to getting dressed, those normal everyday things are so small but so critical to feeling empowered, to feeling independent. And I think we're going to continue to help them if it means getting this dressing hook replicated so that many others, I mean, I've handed out every one I've had, which I went to a manufacturer and bought out as many as I could, because so many people haven't yet figured that out. How do you get dressed without arms? And how do you use a restroom without arms? And using this tool to help someone become independent is life changing. So I've been fortunate to find it early on in life and now share it with others and try to find it in other places so that I can buy them in bulk and pass them out.
Well, and that really leads into my next question also, which is, if you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self?
If I could go back in time, I would definitely tell my younger self to celebrate the difference, to celebrate what makes me unique. So often when I was a young person, and I think this is normal for any young person, you feel compelled to be like everyone else. You feel compelled to fit in and do everything in your power to make sure that you're just like everyone else. And a lot of times, what I did to fit in with everyone was to hide my difference, not knowing that my difference was my greatest gift. And if I could just for a moment tell my younger self to be confident in that difference and know that that's going to be my greatest gift, I think it would have helped me at moments when I had very low self-esteem, at moments when I was very self-conscious, and helped me get through that phase in life.
That's really powerful. So, of all of the amazing things that you've accomplished, everything that you've done with your life so far, what would you say you're most proud of?
There are so many things to be proud of, and I think about it even in my 30s now, and I continue to just do more and more. And I think, though, one of those things that I want to highlight, especially for this interview, is that journey to self acceptance and confidence. That is something we are all on, and we are all in different stages of that journey. And for me, it was my greatest accomplishment to be able to come to a point where, yes, not everyone's going to be comfortable, I should say, with my difference. And that's okay. But ultimately, it's my job to be the best version of myself and to finally come to that understanding and to not let the reactions from the public affect me in a negative way and instead turn it into a unique positive opportunity. I think that for me is a great accomplishment, an emotional journey of self-acceptance and confidence.
I love that. It sounds like one of the next things that you're going to be working on is actually building a custom airplane. Is that right? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. My 501c3 nonprofit called Right Footed Foundation International is now on a mission to build a custom airplane so that flying can be more a part of our mission. I currently am certified to fly a 1946 airplane because it is a vintage airplane. It is a beautiful plane, but there are challenges for doing more with it because it has limited airspeed. It has limited, for me, I have a certain duration of keeping my feet up on the controls as I do. So with this custom airplane, I will be able to have the controls on the floor, which will allow for more of our work to travel more places and spread the message that disability doesn't mean inability, to fly into airports and meet with children and meet with families and inspire them to be able to get to a place faster and to take children up on flights that will change their life. So we are on a mission to take on the daunting task of building this custom airplane, which, just to give you an idea, building a kit airplane starts at 2,000 hours. So it is a very big project, but once we have this custom designed, there's no telling what we'll be able to achieve and how far we'll be able to go and how many lives we'll be able to touch with the custom airplane.
That's awesome. As we wrap up today, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? And especially, where can listeners go to get in touch with you, learn more about you, your organization, all of that good stuff?
Well, please go to jessicacox.com and find out more about our projects, about the nonprofit Right Footed Foundation International, which is a 501c3, to find out more about a book that I wrote called Disarm Your Limits, as well as if you're interested in letting your company or organization or event know that I am a keynote speaker and travel all over the world, 27 countries thus far, to speak and share the message. So feel free to reach out on jessicacox.com.
Awesome. And we will put the link in the show notes for anybody who's interested in following up. All right. Well, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Tune in next time for another dive into the unknown.
Adventures in Accessibility is hosted by Emily Schumann, and Jessica Lucinia is our sound engineer. This podcast is a project of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center and is funded under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant number 90DPAD0009-01-00. This production is intended solely for entertainment and informal guidance and should not be considered legal advice. The opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily held or endorsed by the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.